and then I'll see how I go on my. Here we go.
The hottest selling product, man. He trending on the topic. No, we hotter than the tropics. Yeah, you know my girls are goddess. Obnoxiously obnoxious. Give some fucks about the objects, cause the
All
market's
right, all right. We're here for episode 3 of Money Never Sleeps with two amazing artists and important figures in the space, ACK and Patrick Amadon. I'm hyped. Again, we just gonna hang out. Nobody's prepared anything, and all of us just having kind of a fireside chat. So, my first question is: one of the things that really distinguishes artists is their choice of colors and signature colors. And both of you have very distinct and recognizable colors. I'd love to hear about how you ended up selecting those colors, what they mean to you, and how you generally think about color selection in your work.
Patrick, please take the lead.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And ACK, it's awesome to see you. This is great. So thank you, and appreciate everyone listening to this. So, yeah, signature color. I mean, I don't know. I just like the kind of visceral nature of red. I think there's something about. I think you can use like simple palettes to kind of convey some things a little more effectively sometimes. And I feel like a lot of times when you strip something down, what you're actually like doing or saying just kind of hits a little bit harder. So I think in a lot of recent stuff, I've been trying to just pare back the palette to just kind of kind of always just trying to strip it down to kind of what's essential. And I feel like you pick a strong color, you put that in place, and like it just kind of sometimes it just hits a little bit harder. So that's kind of how I feel on that.
Hell yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for the piano collection in particular, I don't know if I set out to choose any specific colors. I kind of just let the scene help dictate what colors. And sometimes, you just get lucky and pick this certain shade of pink and it just looks great. But yeah, I think I like to be free and available to whatever the scene needs me to choose to help tell the story the best.
Yeah, and I mean, what I've noticed about some of the top artists is they always have a very limited and recognizable color palette. And I'm with you, Patrick. I think using the simplest way to convey a cool message in a familiar but like a recognizable but slightly different way is often what makes a huge difference. And I agree, like red, and there's something just about red and black that I find, naturally so important. In terms of subject matter, I'd love to hear, Patrick, you've been motivated a lot by political issues. ACK, you are, talk about the muse and the inspiration. I'd love to hear from both of you as we shift from color. What's the underlying thing that motivates a lot of your art, and how do you think about your art and what it means in a greater sense to you, your life, what you're doing,
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
Go for it. Go for it.
Why don't you start this one? You go this one.
Okay. So, I guess I'm kind of a hopeless romantic in the core of a lot of my art. And I like to I like Shakespeare, and I like to try and tell somewhat romantic stories, but also stories that are like tragic and like scary to think about. And
you stealing people's girl.
Well, I'm not stealing anyone's girl and giving them flowers. Yeah, no intention to steal anyone's girl, but I'm happy to give them all flowers. But yeah. I mean, I like to touch on stuff like that and just make beautiful art.
And so the idea is the ideation piece for you, ACK. You speak of the muse. When you're sitting there, obviously you spend a lot of time dedicated to the piano. We talked about that on another show. We've heard a lot about that. But generally speaking, that's a big theme. How are you generally sort of coming up with these ideas, and how are you thinking about? Is it you have to get them out of you? Is it something you think about, reflect on, and then want to say something? Or, and Patrick, I'd love to hear the same for you.
Well, that's a great question. Yeah, lately I've been channeling just music in general and just thinking and like just sitting and thinking, and I'll see like glimpses or visions of a thing and like of a scene. And then I think on that for like a few days. And if I'm still feeling strongly about it, I take it further and I try to like bring something about it to life, to paint some sort of a story, to give me clues on, okay, this is what needs to happen next. And playing piano helps channel all of that energy as well. So, yeah.
Patrick.
I love that. And you know,
Thank you.
I'd love to hear the piano at some point too. I feel like
We'll
it's
get
a tease sitting back
get it.
there.
We'll
Yeah,
get him to play.
Yeah, I love
Whatever
that.
you want, bro.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't know. My favorite artist, like kind of growing up, was obviously is Banksy. You know, and the thing I liked about Banksy was I always liked how everything he does is a critical look at something else, right? So like every thing is always poking at something else, you know. And I always kind of go back to the work he did, you know, in the Gaza Strip, you know, poking at the occupation and so forth. I think that's always something I'm trying to do with my work. You know, it takes a while. I mean, kind of inspiration comes from kind of all different directions, as you know, you both know. But I feel like I don't know, for me, it always has to be some critical element of like poking at something, trying to show a light on something that maybe isn't being talked about. Like how is art going to just kind of drive kind of a public discussion around an issue that, you know, I care about. So basically it's like really just coming up with a story and a narrative that feels like authentic and right, something that, you know, as an artist, you just want to share. And then it's more about, okay, cool, like you have this thing you want to say, how do you visually represent that and how do you get that across? Because the artist kind of gets to play a bit of the role of the jester in all this, in the sense that you can speak truth that you couldn't necessarily get away with the same way if you actually had to say it or speak it. Mm-hmm. But you can put stuff in your work that just kind of slips around a lot of like the guardrails and the barriers and, you know, the agreed upon channels for how you express something. So I feel like we get a lot of power in that. And I feel like, you know, I mean, try. I mean, if you hit a couple in a career, you've done well, but just try to get a few things in there where like you said something meaningful at the right time and it resonated with some people. So yeah, so constantly always thinking about kind of like socio-political situations. You know, a lot of it's just like making fun of the kind of the microculture that we're in, you know, in the space. Really just trying to focus on like, hey, what can you say that's going to resonate with people and will have some durability as a message, you know, 5, 10, 20 years down the road. So.
Yeah, I mean, no, you do a great job at it, man. Like I love that every time I see any work from you, I can feel like the energy that you put into it, and like I can tell that you take your job very seriously as an artist. And that's what I like to see, because like for me, you know, we're artists, we're charged with telling impactful stories. And yeah, you definitely do that very well.
Oh, that means a lot. I feel the same about your work. You know, I always love the new stuff. And I feel like the cadence of when you release is really, really good for everybody else to kind of take note of, because you always take your time with everything. It's not like a metronome, right? Like when you release work is like when it's ready. And I've always appreciated about your stuff. It's always spot on.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, that's dope. I mean, this is a topic that many artists in the space, particularly at this time, are wrestling with, is like supply. And, you know, I'm a huge fan. Both of you have done some really interesting things, not just in controlling supply, but thinking about ways to come to market. In fact, I would flag both the piano and the doppelganger as two, obviously, the biggest and most important things that happened in NFTs this year. And both were very interesting in how they thought about supply. And Patrick, in your case, 101s and doing derivatives. And ASK, in your case, like in the middle of that thing, dropping 48 1-of-1s around a theme was a very unique approach. So I think both of you have shown some really cool stuff. And in terms of messaging, you know, Patrick, I know you've been very active with the Chinese dissonance and are not on a list for sure, on many lists, which takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
So generally, I mean, how were you guys able to think through those supply stuff? I mean, I've talked about you a ton about it, and it's a joy. But for the listeners, like, and for the artists out there, again, you've talked about. So in your case, Patrick, you said you started with sort of something that triggered you, and then you made an image. ACK, in your case, you said it's constantly a combo of whether it's musical things or things you're seeing triggering you to come up with ideas. How do you think about making art as like an artist, and then this other piece, which is the hard part of like market and economics and floor prices and so on?
Yeah, great question. I definitely thought a lot more about it earlier on. I mean, I still think about it. Oh, I don't want to say thought, like I worried more about it early on, trying to keep up with everything. And you still feel that now, but I've overcome that and just had to accept, like, because I was terrified to release the piano collection, and when I did, so I thought they're not going to sell out. I'm going to be ashamed of myself. I'm going to look. No one's gonna like me anymore. And you think that's shit, no matter what. Yeah. And but I knew that me feeling that alone was a good sign, because it's not just releasing another NFT when it's safe and convenient. And yeah, I mean, I think the supply thing, like I made my 10th PFP, like I made it while Richard was coding up the auction site, but I don't feel ready to release them yet. And that's partly because, I just had big sales, and also like timing just doesn't feel right. So I have work I want to release, but I want to wait, a few months, and I want to wait till it like speaks to me, like until he's ready to be born and stuff like that. So I think letting the art help dictate like a 60, 40, 70, 30 relationship. You also need to think about, I don't know, you probably shouldn't even think about the market. If you feel strongly about it, just release it.
How about you, Patrick? What do you think of that?
Well, I agree with what ACK just said. I think that was spot on. I think there's a lot of different factors, right? And I think one of the biggest factors is kind of where you're at with your career as well. First of all, I think like create obsessively, mint selectively. You should always be creating, but I think you have to be really, really cognizant about what you actually decide to mint.
Yes.
And I feel like every artist can kind of produce art at different rates. So I think just sticking with a cadence that makes sense for you as an artist, don't ever push it. Like you said, if you're not feeling it, don't mint it. It's there forever. Unless you're on a chain other than Ethereum. If you're early on, you need a collector base. Like you need people to support you. You need people that are able to invest in you as an artist and then root for you to succeed. It's different being friends with somebody. But if you've invested in a friend of yours, it's just like it's a different dynamic because everyone's on the same page, everyone's shooting for the same thing, and that's incredibly helpful at all stages of your career. But you need the numbers early on. You need a lot of people behind you when you're getting started. And that's kind of how you begin to build. So as you move forward in your career, and if you're fortunate to kind of get through to that level, I think a lot of it becomes, how do you really advance your legacy at that point? How do you advance your message at that point? It becomes different. And I think at that point, it almost behooves you to scale back a little bit and just make sure that the quality of what you put out is just better and better and best.
Yeah.
Because at that point, you just have so many eyeballs on you and so many expectations. Like you really it's more stressful than it is early on. Early on, you're just like building. You can't really slow down to just like figure it out. But once you get a little bit further down the road, everything you do is a very public performance, and everything you do at that point has to be good.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's very different. So I'd say early on, just like mint the good stuff. Later on, mint way less, but only mint the best stuff.
Yes.
And just like pray it works.
Yeah. I'm in full agreement with you on that. Like, that's why I'm building the Grand Skull piano and I'm doing some physical prints, because I have this vision for my next big work, but I want to take months and months and months on it. I don't want to just get another piece out. Like I want to do something that's legacy building and not just another piece of art. So yeah, very well said, man.
Yeah, there were a few points there that I think are super important for people here. One is there is this piece when you're in NFTs and making art. If you look back at the history of contemporary art and what the galleries brought to artists and how things worked, one of the things that's very different now, like you alluded to, Patrick, and I know we all talk, is relationships with collectors directly matter a lot, and building relationships with collectors. Like you said, I think dialing back the ability, once you can not need to eat from the art, you're in the most powerful position where you can do the things you said. And so I think, having that freedom, like you said, as you're later, if you get to a place in your career, choking back supply doesn't mean you choke back like what you're doing. You produce as you need to produce, but being very deliberate, because at that point, you can actually live your dream more, only selling fewer pieces, doing what you want and dream. And so I think you've made some super important and really thoughtful points there. You were talking about the music, ACK. So at any time we're happy for you to play. For those so on this piano you're building, two questions I had is, one, what's it like to work with your father-in-law? And two, many people don't know, but how are you incorporating all the sound and the music stuff? Because I was surprised to hear. Both those. I'd love to hear.
No, I mean, my father-in-law's he's a mad scientist for sure. He can like construct anything and bring anything to life pretty much. So yeah, him and I are teaming up. We've fully committed to this. We're having the 3D skull printed in sections, and it'll be like hollowed out, but we're channeling it so the sound waves will come out of the eye sockets and just blast, the player and the audience. But yeah, and we'll have other things about it that will be really special. But yeah, it plays itself. I mean, I'll play.
I think here it's important. So I think it's important to note. I stupidly one day texted ACK. I'm like, hey man, this is really dumb, but okay.
Yeah, it's cool, man. That's one of my favorite Mozarts.
Oh, I love that.
Can you play for us?
Do you want me to play?
Can you play? Yeah, I'd love that if you feel comfortable. I don't want to put you on the spot. I feel you. When people are like, can you rap right now? And I'm like, no. All I was going to say is that one of the things when I was reading all about the plans for the piano, I'm like, hey, stupid question, but like, have you talked to a sound engineer about this? And so, ACK, please share your answer, because that shit was dope.
Well, yeah, no, I was just like, oh, but I am a sound engineer. And my earlier days just working in studios, and it was just, yeah, it's a perfect fit. Like all the elements together combined will help, bring the Grand Skull piano to life. So yeah, maybe I'll play in a minute, but yeah, let's keep the chat going.
Yeah, dude, I feel you. You know what? Nothing worse than being like, do art on demand.
Yeah.
Patrick, so we talked a little with ACK how music's one of his big inspirations. You've talked about how political issues. I've spent a bunch of time with you, and you're such a thoughtful guy and very systematic. Can you talk a little bit about what sort of is the trigger for your inspirations? What is the hardest part of being an artist for you right now? Like, what have you found the biggest struggle at this stage in your career? And either creatively or, with the market or anything. I'd just love to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, back to what ACK was saying, or, with his background on the piano and so forth and sound engineering, I don't know. I feel like we all have different backgrounds, and we all have different experiences, and we all have a different capacity to tell stories in our own way. And I feel like the more artists lean into that, the more you lean into your experiences and how that affects your ability to tell your story, I think the more interesting the art becomes. And I think that goes for artists. I mean, it goes for mediums. I think like you look at the artists who are really into a specific genre or something, and the ones that have been doing it for a long time know all the nuances, know where the boundaries are, know how to best tell a story. I mean, telling the story of a movie over 2.5 hours is one thing, but trying to tell the story of that movie in like a teaser trailer is different, right? The different capsules that capture this, the different genres, the different, all require different elements. I think the ones that master telling stories within their own respective spaces, I think it makes it really interesting. So, as for my background, like, I was always a huge news hound, right? Like from early on, just like as soon as I could access like online news, I'm just kind of reading about world news. My degree in economics and art history. I got a dual. So my background.
Economics philosophy undergrad.
Nice. So I don't know. That's always been what's been very interesting to me. Is just kind of world events and kind of our place within that, kind of our responsibility and kind of how we can participate in pushing things forward in a positive way. So that's kind of where it all comes from. It's also kind of why I'm in this and other interviews, just why Banksy was such an inspiration, because he blended that focus of kind of social awareness with art to tell stories. And it was like, oh, well, like kind of the whole social awareness thing is something I've loved for a long time. When I first got started making glitch work, back in 2012, I would make glitch versions of physical pieces and then share those. And then I would also make, this is like around the beginnings of like the Syrian civil war. I'd take a bunch of like the images that you couldn't show on TV because they're horrifying. And it was also a situation where nobody cared in the States, right? It was like, right. Oh, wait, there's no oil. Okay, whatever. Like that's just people killing each other. Who cares? So I'd take these images that you couldn't show, but then if you glitched them, it just kind of abstracted it from reality just enough. It obscured some of the kind of the violence to the place where you could actually like show it. So I started just like stacking layers of these images on loops. And so I was doing glitched physical paintings, which are just abstracts, and then separately just doing kind of glitched versions of these kind of political situations, whether, it's like, Boris Nemtsov getting killed, like the Ferguson protests, Syrian civil war. And then I just kind of I hit a point in 2016 where I was talking with Jerry Saltz about it. I was like, hey, like, I was feeling a little like creatively like stuck. Like I felt like I was doing two things going in two separate directions. And I asked him, I was like, hey, what do you think about this? And he's like, he's like, you got to start over. So I did. And I was like, how do I make this all work for me? And then I realized, what if I figure out how to combine the two things? So then I can do both of the two things that I care about, which is like making kind of the glitch digital art versions of the physical pieces, but also having the separate thing where there's like the political social narrative and just like make art that incorporates both of those. So that was it. I mean, like that was what I care about. That's what I like doing. And being able to figure out through art how to combine all of the interests into kind of like a single like thematic focus brought a lot of clarity and it was like a big kind of like level up for me as an artist. And the clarity helped a lot, and then I really started enjoying the work that I was doing again. It's
crazy how you can kind of rediscover yourself through your art. It's wild.
Totally. Totally. I love
Have you had that experience, ACK, as well? Something similar?
Oh, dude, I'm still learning shit about pianos that I didn't even realize I put in there that are so symbolic to things in my life.
Yeah.
It blows my mind. Yeah.
I used to joke I'd re-listen to my own freestyles. I'd be like, wow, I must have some problem with that because I'm like talking about it. Patrick, on your activism, how has it cost you as an artist to be such an activist?
Well, I mean, the fun one to share is that, I got hacked by the Chinese government.
Yeah,
they
bro,
wrote some,
they're solid on your ass right now.
yeah,
Gosh.
they wrote some, yeah,
Wait,
they
why don't
wrote,
you give people? I mean, I think everyone knows, but Patrick had a piece. Why don't you give a quick 30 seconds, 60 seconds on what you did?
yeah.
Because it's awesome.
I got offered to put up a piece on a billboard in the middle of Art Week in Hong Kong, government sponsored Art Week, largest billboard in the city, right in the middle of it all. So I put up a piece that was a giant surveillance.
Yeah, those
camera.
motherfuckers didn't research you because somebody's ass needs to be fired. They're like, let's get this political activist.
Yeah. So I put up a security camera right in the middle of the city, which was kind of obvious, but kind of fun, but also safe enough to get out there. So just making fun of their surveillance state, but also want to just go an extra step. So you're not allowed, it's against the Hong Kong national security law to do this, but I took a lot of the protesters' names who are all being tried and imprisoned right now for protesting, like basic expression. And I put their names, their ages, their sentences, a lot of instances of journalists getting beaten by, thugs, right? So like every 10th frame or so, there's just some glitching text, but in the text has all this information. So, I was kind of thinking of like the scene in Fight Club where he splices in the so I was like, oh, let's do that in the middle of Hong Kong on this giant billboard. So like every 10 seconds, like there'd just be like a bunch of like illegal material about the protester being broadcast to the whole city. And it was up for 3 days before they caught it. And then when they caught it, it immediately came down. A bunch of people, like the billboard company got threatened, the gallery got threatened, they threatened. The gallery then turned out was like threatened me. I had to sign paperwork saying they had no idea. Their lawyers wanted me to just like absolve them of knowledge so they didn't get sued or fined or jailed. And anyway, I'm looking at a couple years in jail if I go back to Hong Kong.
Do not go there,
Yeah, and then they wrote some custom malware and hacked me, so I had to like get everything rebooted. But I've got some, it's crypto Twitter. Like we've got some real cybersecurity experts here, so they've been incredibly helpful.
Yeah, we really do.
It's crazy. It's a crazy story, man.
But there's kind of a funny one that nobody knows yet too. I did a timepieces thing for Deepak Chopra. And I always have a healthy amount of distrust for people that put themselves out as great philanthropists when we may not know that exactly. So and he's built an incredible fortune through all of this. So my timepieces thing just has like a bunch of like scenes spliced through because they wanted me to do the cover of his book, which was his 25th anniversary. So on the cover of his 25th anniversary book, there's a bunch of things spliced in there about like his fortune, his wealth, his like sales material.
You're so Tyler Durden, bro. I didn't know that.
It's like all these like sales, because I mean the whole thing is like a giant marketing enterprise. So like basically just a bunch of sales contracts. And so on the 25th anniversary, it's just a bunch of these things spliced on the cover, which is pretty funny.
Nice, man. Nice.
I didn't tell anybody, but told you guys.
Now you did.
Everybody knows. Yeah. Secrets out.
I want to switch gears to something that it's funny because it's seemingly I've been interested in both your guys' reactions on this. ACK, the piano piece when it came out has inspired a ton of myself included for fun. Like there's something about a specific thing that's very recognizable. Patrick, you said something which resonates with me that I learned with tattoos. If you see the same like style of tattoo a million times and you see someone who understands it super well, does something you totally recognize but a little different, that's actually in a way like the most powerful thing, like to be like, oh my God, this is an image I know so well. Like in my case, there'd be a traditional like tattoo style, and this person's done it in a way that's different. I've never seen that's original. So your piano inspired a bunch of derivatives. And interestingly, an issue, something I think is interesting from people who bought the pianos as well, and people are selling those derivatives. Patrick, I don't know if there's instances of your work, but you've done something different. You did your own derivatives of your one of ones and made it the doppelganger. So we've had two really interesting things here, and I've had very active discussions with both of you on it. I'll share my opinion after, but I'd much more like to hear. So ACK, in your case, how do you feel about this? Like, I don't even know. Were the pianos TCO?
No, but I mean,
And Patrick, in
for
your case, doing your own derivatives and thinking derivatives. So either of you, I'd share and jump in at any time. But
yeah, no,
hit me.
yeah, I don't know if I really believe CCO is. I mean, it's cool. I think, but like, if you're gonna take a piece of work from anyone and then make your own work out of it, you don't need that original work to be CCO. Like, as long as you're creative enough, you can use work. Like, so when I see people make new works with my work, and I mean the piano, I don't know the piano, but like the piano derivatives, I think were all beautiful. And if an artist feels inspired to make a piano derivative and sell it, I mean, I have a hard time trying to think about what another artist should or shouldn't do. I think, but yeah, like I'm cool with derivatives. I just don't feel the need to like declare CCO on my stuff.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I wouldn't. There's no way. If I were you, I understand. There's also an argument for it. Patrick, let's hear the argument for why you might want to do that.
Yeah, look, I mean, we have blockchain provenance. We'll know when things were created, who created them. I feel like, as we've seen, and I think we'll continue to see, that derivatives only enhance the value of the original. You know,
Yeah.
kind of the more the original piece gets out there in whatever various form, I feel like the more attention and relevance it has. And I think at the end of the day, our durability as artists depends on our continued relevance to society and culture. And the durability of our artwork is going to depend on its continued relevance to society and culture. And they're very tied together. So I feel like something like CC0, just especially early on, is really kind of forming the base layer of a different way of looking at IP. And a lot of things, I mean, art leads the way, you know, and I feel like in this case, you know, if art can set a good example of releasing IP for the community to then build upon, like to ACK's point, I mean, like there's a Carew v. Prince, right? Supreme Court decision that said like basically Prince flipped Carew's photograph and said, and that was determined it was transformative enough that he could do that as an artist. So I mean, we have free license to really do basically anything as long as it's art. But I feel like CCO is just that extra step and kind of puts a label on exactly that in a way that makes it easy for people to understand and frees people up to take a look at something and just know they can freely use that and build with that. We're so early. You look at what this is going to look like when, I mean, you look at the amount of screens, the amount of real estate that we actually have to share digital art right now. It's 10 times what it was a decade ago. And there are some amazing large scale displays that are emerging, wraparound billboards on buildings, like giant wall size displays within homes. I mean, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, digital art will be the display. And you look at what we have right now, and I don't know, I feel like if there's any reason to be kind of bullish on what we're building at this kind of primordial stage of digital art, it's the fact that we will have access to the most important real estate for visual representation now, and even more so in the future. So so I think just CCO, I think is really important. I think it sends a really good message. And if anything, like the quicker and faster we build as a community towards an ecosystem that is equitable, diverse, inclusive, and different than what it was before, I feel like the quicker we can achieve that level of relevance, that's really going to make this sink in. So I don't know. So that's why I'm for it. I think it's good for the community. I think it's good for everyone to build on. Do I think you should do it? No. You know, like everyone should do exactly what they want to do. I mean, like, look, I can't go sell my work to a corporation the same way if I'm CC0. And if you need that as your source of income, if that's your thing, cool. Like, artists should just make a living first and foremost. Like, nothing should stop you from that. I mean, it's hard enough as it is, and coming, you know, as an artist for a long time, like, you got to make your ends meet. You got to figure it out. You have a side job, whatever else it is, do that, make it work. If you want to sell the corporation, cool, do it. Like, there's no judgment either way. But, you know, I'm in a fortunate position with everything right now. So I don't need that. And I feel like I might as well give that back to the community and say, yeah, build whatever you want with it, you know? So that's where
Yeah,
I'm
and
at.
you've been a leader in that. What's interesting for me is when I first saw CCO was MFers, and at first I was like, what the fuck? I'm gonna like buy something and anybody can do whatever. Then I saw the power of like the free marketing, as you said. What's interesting to me is I'm just gonna be like frank. It surprised me a bit that in art my instincts, and maybe I'll have to go through the same evolution. So I totally agree that like, look, one of the things we've seen is like a ton of work is produced, most won't matter, being honest, and to be something that mattered in the history of digital art and NFTs, just like contemporary art, um, it has to be something that impacted the culture and is remembered and celebrated. I had a funny reaction when I first saw ACK can wrap me out, but when I first saw people profiting off, I made a bunch of pianos and I was like, yo, I'm just like having fun. And I saw people selling, like buying the art and owning this beautiful thing and then selling and profiting on it. And oddly, my initial reaction was negative because I felt like, hey, if I buy a piece from an artist, it doesn't mean I can create art and profit off it. And so it's been interesting for me to be educated by you, both of you, on this. As somebody who did believe in CCO for for projects that didn't have a budget, um, or didn't, think they could inspire people to create commercial value with their stuff. So it's been a real interesting thing for me. So I want to actually use this to dovetail into a second thing, which is we've talked a lot about relationships with collectors and community. Patrick, you're really vocal, and after the doppelganger, I was like, oh, we should have like a Discord, and you've been very vocal about not having side discussions. ACK, we have a Discord for the piano and building community around it. How do you guys think about these other aspects of being an artist, like having a Discord, the community piece and your choices around it? And how do you think it impacts you personally, your work, and, your sort of the anything about you, your legacy, relationships, etc.?
I don't think it's necessary to have a Discord and like have these side convos like Patrick's saying, but I think it's like I have it because like, hey, I'm gonna make some pranks and like I'm gonna let people know, hey, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. But anything to be expected outside of that is, I think, a mistake. Like there should be no expectations on an artist to like tap and dance for you. Like just we're here to make beautiful art. That's my job. And that's the only thing I can promise. Anything other than that, like I love having good relationships with people who are willing to spend money on my art and even beyond that. But I think I'd rather have a friendship with someone rather than them like expecting stuff from me. Like, let's have a friendship and a relationship and, see what, go from there. So.
I love that. I mean, yeah, I agree with ACK. And I feel like I feel like there's a lot of conflation that happens in the space. I mean, I think the main thing is kind of collectibles versus art, right? Everyone just kind of thinks of them.
Yeah.
And they're just totally different cultures with a lot of crossover and who's in it. But, so again, this is not prescriptive by any means, right? Artists should do exactly what artists want to do. And for some artists, it makes sense to have a Discord. For others, no. My thing is like, and then I think like having diversity is good too. Like different people want different things. Like you have multiple different restaurants. You don't just have the best restaurant everywhere in town, right? People want different things. And I feel like just for me personally, I've been very vocal about what I care about publicly. I've been very vocal about being inclusive. I've been very vocal about just my opinions in general. And I just, for me as an artist, I don't want to have any discord where there could be a perception that I'm giving preferential treatment to a certain class of people, especially if it's token gated. Like I don't want the artists and the people who can't afford the work to feel like they're being left out of the best discussions or information or so forth. So while I think it would be more effective as like career building price and kind of the whole business side of it, I think there's a lot of value there. I think long-term overall, I think for me, I think it makes more sense that everybody just knows that everything I talk about is public and on Twitter and right there. Like no one's getting preferential treatment. And I think that's, long-term, I think that's healthy for me specifically as an artist. So, not prescriptive, but that's just kind of how I feel.
Yeah. And we're talking, this is why we're here. We're all giving, I love it. Like what makes this interesting is, so my opinion, I got scammed in Discord at the beginning of when I got into NFTs and lost a shit ton of money, 30K. And it was devastating. And I was like, fuck Discord and all this. I ended up going into Discord because Discord, what I found is unique. Like, again, I've studied a lot recently how contemporary art worked. In contemporary art, 100 artists matter. 4 galleries were the most important. The galleries did controlled pricing. It was opaque. They controlled collectors and, would help make artists. And artists were left out a lot of that process, which was part of what inspired me in NFTs, is that artists are participating and have direct relationships with collectors. So I think Discords are hard unless you have like enough collectors, and I've seen Twitter groups. So what I would say is it's interesting, and just I'm a huge believer in community, and I'm a huge believer in rewarding people who supported you early, because I think it's very easy when somebody's successful to tell history like you're here with 2 incredible artists and last week the same. And it seems so obvious in hindsight. But I'll tell you in the beginning, both you guys, I know somewhat of your history, and it's not worth, but like it wasn't obvious the first few pieces you sold, and those people who saw. And so it's interesting for me to hear. What I'd like to ask you is, what do you think is the value? Okay, the space has changed a lot since both of you have been releasing art. How important are platforms? And how important are curators? And how do you think about how you work with both of those? Because I know both of you have been deliberate on your last drop. You did a Manifold piece and you worked with Transient. So I'd like to hear about what's the importance of platforms, what's the importance of curation?
Let me think. I mean, I think platforms served a purpose. I don't know if that purpose is still exists or not, but I think at one point they did, and perhaps they still do. I'm not sure. But I don't know. I think.
Do you think about what platform you're dropping on, or are you just like, I'm going to do
no? I'm pretty sure I'll just release art myself for the rest of my career, to be honest. But I have that luxury. Not everyone has that luxury. But yeah, I do. I mean, Manifold's, just as good or better because you're on your own contract. And but I don't know. I don't know if our art needs to be curated by other people. I guess I'm torn. I'm 50-50 on these groups that are curating art for other people. I just don't know how I feel. I'm kind of lukewarm on it. Like I don't know.
You did a noble drop.
Well, yeah, but I respect Artifaction and his background in art and his love for art. That's why, I respect.
So you'll support I think that makes sense. You'll support curators who you believe in.
Yes.
Patrick, what do you think on those questions? I'd love to hear your
view. Well, I agree again. I agree with ACK again here. Look, if we didn't go through all of the external things in 2021 and 2022, we'd be in such a worse place right now as a digital art movement. If Super Rare was the sole arbiter of who's a good artist and who's not, as it was when we first got into space, I think we'd be in a really bad place right now. The fact that you can release on Manifold and anyone can do it, I feel like the space is far more inclusive and accessible than it would have been otherwise. I don't think platforms have adjusted to the times well, right? It was at the beginning, everybody worshiped the platforms because you had to be on the platform in order to be able to sell your work. It was like, get on Super Rare or you're not making a living as an artist. And then you had to just figure out that. And Super Rare, I think, knew that. And Super Rare acted like that. I love them. We're good. But I think right now what we need to see from platforms is a pivot from, we can mint anywhere now. We can mint on Manifold. I minted my last one-of-one on Manifold because I think it's important for us, and I know ACK does this, to just mint on our own. And the more prominent artists mint on their own and don't rely on the platforms, I feel like that empowers a lot of the other artists to be able to do the same and flip the power dynamic between artists and platforms. I want to see more platforms. If you're not solving discoverability for artists, you're not doing anything. Nobody needs your contract to mint on. Nobody needs anything else that you're doing other than you have to figure out a way to make it easy to find the art that you want to find as an artist, as a collector, right? That's one of the
Where do you
biggest things
think
for
where do you
collectors.
think that's being done well, discoverability?
This is gonna sound funny, but TikTok, like they have figured out an algorithm that feeds you what you want to see. Somebody in our space needs to figure out an algorithm that feeds you the art that you want to see based on whatever they do. But I think that's the biggest thing. And I feel
How
like,
about for non-established art though? Like, so if you're looking at some artist new, this is where the curation question comes in, where galleries used to be useful. If you're the two of you, if you're in the space, you should know who you are. But there's some you, future you. And there's people out there who are collecting, like you said, ACK, you respect Artie. I respect Artie a ton, and Noble. I respect obviously our project a lot, and I think there's some like the Alpha Dog and a handful of curators who I respect who have been around who are real in the space. And so I'm with you. That's what's interesting is I think platforms serve curation functions, which to varying degrees they do less or more of now. And that's where you've seen that, like when your response is, yeah, well, if it's like these handful of people. So I think discoverability, you're right. There hasn't been a technology solution, which it does seem like one of the things, when I first got onto Tezos last year, one of the things that was cool is I just go through all the artists' wallets, and somehow it was much easier, all the Tez artists. And I used the discovery that way, plus the tags. And even though the tags weren't consistent, one of the big things am advocating for discoverability and personally do and have shared, I think with both of you, is I take artists' work and then I have the AI do a describe function on it. And the AI, if you use Midjourney, for example, you can put the picture and it'll give you 4 different prompts, which will recreate similar works, and I run it. And so I do think and I actually have proposed this to some platforms, is if you consistently did this with all artists' work where it was a non-human categorizing, I think you're dead right, Patrick, what you could do. And that's, I'm probably giving away my idea, but like you could literally just classify and make much more discoverable. The problems.
I was going to say, I think Deca does that, don't they?
I'm going to embarrass myself. And I'm laughing at myself because I'm thinking of Uncle Pennybags making fun of me right now. Deca is something I know. I've seen people curate Deca galleries. I don't know if Deca does that, but to me, if you could, do they?
I mean, go ahead, Patrick. Yeah, you might know better than I haven't.
Oh no, you got this. You got this.
Okay. No, yeah, if you can put a piano in there, and then it'll give you 40 different works that are similar to that piano that are for sale by other artists, or not for sale, or just minted or something. Yeah.
Oh, this is why we have badasses on here no more than me.
Let's see. I love that. I think that's a good first step. You can't have artists putting in their own tags because there's not going to be any standardization. It's going to be all over the place. You're just basically going to have a mess like you do right now.
I agree. Yeah. That's why I wanted AI like a standard.
You just need an AI solution that just looks at all of something and then automatically categorizes it, which, I mean, honestly, at this stage is not necessarily the most impossible thing to build.
No, I agree. It's actually already available. But how about the still, even if it's all classified, I still believe, and this is obviously self-serving, so I don't know. I honestly find that if you have it all classified and everything's good and you can look, how do you know in the millions of noise who to spend time on? And so to me, What?
I said, I don't think you can.
Well, that's where curation, I think, has where the platforms used to serve curation value. And I get you don't want gatekeeping, but at the same time, if you have 2 million options, nobody can figure out which.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting time for the space. I agree. I think we need not only discoverability, but how do you take that discoverability? So one of the things I also think a lot is like, and you sort of referred to in your work, again, is like, how do you measure if something's like interesting or not? So I do this in reverse, is what I say is let me take an artist's work and I put it in AI, and then I try to recreate it with how the AI described it. And one of the interesting things is there's a huge variability. Some artists you can recreate very precisely with AI, and others you can't. Again, I don't know if it's a measure of anything, but I think the next step is some meta overlay of like, okay, there are 1,000 works like this. Let me compare all 1,000, just like we would with our eyes. Like when I got on Instagram years ago to look at tattoos, I've been collecting tattoos for 24 years. And my view is like if you've seen 3 pieces of art or 3 tattoos and then you see a 4th, you don't really have any ability to judge, right? Like 3 other pieces, that's the best for. If you've seen 20,000 tattoos, there's a much more likely chance you'll know if something's interesting. And so actually, I do think, Patrick, this is where, and ACK, where like you were saying, Deca, I better look at it. But if you could say like, okay, I have a stat, I've like basically looked at the visual, and here's like 6 pieces that stand out doing something new or unique or different, which is sort of what a curator does a bit. It's like, it's part. So I don't know what the answer is, but I agree with you. That's like a massive issue in the space that needs.
I gotta say one thing. So just about the curators, I feel like there's a difference between a curator and like an art writer. I mean, we need more people in the space who are willing to write about artists and write about art and write about movements, write about genres, write about themes, because we need more things written to contextualize what we're all looking at. I feel like, quote, curator, which is the employee hired to select artists for a website, is not really a curator. Put together 3 shows recently and specifically tried to
that was
highlight
amazing.
artists
You did amazing.
Well, I mean, specifically, I wanted to completely deprioritize, commercial success and social media presence, and say like, cool, like what art makes sense in this show. And I feel like we'll start seeing like more of that. I think I think we just need more. Look, most people collecting are kind of new to this whole thing, right? And I feel like it would be really helpful to have some conviction in the space and to be able to know, hey, I like this art, but then I also saw an article written by an independent writer that liked this art too. Do you feel more convicted about going in on that, as opposed to just having to rely solely on price signaling and a lot of the metrics that, while are imperfect, are kind of all we have to go on right now. So that's my pitch for that.
I want each of you, before we wrap up, to ask a question of anyone here or talk about anything you want. I didn't want to have to ask a question. I'd love anything we haven't discussed you'd like to talk about or ask about.
I want
including my excellent haircut.
You and me both. Streamline. Let's
streamline, bro.
I love your work. What was the moment where you knew like, hey, like art might be a thing, like growing up, like when you're like, what was like the moment where you're like, art is like on my radar for you?
I think learning about like Da Vinci, just learning about how Da Vinci just like was such a master at not just painting, but anything he did. Like he was such a master, and it was just so interesting. Like the difference of like he can go from this to this to this, all extreme differences, and he was still a master at each one. And I loved that he had that ability. And I guess, just the dream of being an artist and expressing my feelings, visually has just always been something that I can't not do. I have to do it in either music or one way or the other, writing lyrics, something. I have to be expressing whatever I'm feeling. So, yeah.
How old were you? How old were you when you kind of came across?
Probably middle school. I had like,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I had an art teacher who was just like super enthusiastic and taught me, you know, important things about Van Gogh and the Mona Lisa, stuff like that.
Okay, so I love that because I totally see that in your work, kind of the multidisciplinary approach with a lot of the construction, the kind of the science, and like that makes sense to me. Like I see like the essence of that in your work. So that's
Thank you.
That's a really cool, like, yeah, cool point.
Yeah, for you. So when like your first minted piece to now, like how do you look back on your work? Do you look back on your work fondly? Like, do you look back like fully proud of every work you've ever minted?
I've been really selective about what I've minted. I'm happy with the work that I put out there, to the point that, you know, after basically just making art for kicks, I got trapped. I started making art I couldn't sell for a decade, you know, before NFTs. Like, so being able to actually make a living doing this now with art is incredible. And it's just something like it's a big reason why figuring out how to make this space more inclusive, more accessible, and how to make this more doable for other artists means a lot to me, because I'm so appreciative of like the opportunity that's afforded me. I just want to see that, you know, come back to other people. So
no, I only asked because like thinking about my like artist to artist, like I did a lot of like fucking experimenting early on, and I'm like, oh shit, you know, you never expect people to care about your work, like. But I minted what I liked. I minted what it was fun for me at the beginning. But dude, yeah, I loved everything you made. And I remember Anonymous sharing your work when I first learned about you. And yeah, Anonymous is great, by the way. Good dude.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, huge fan, dude. Huge fan of your work.
Thanks. Vice versa. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Love you too, OG.
Love you guys, man. This is amazing. You too. No, but I really feel that. And look, I so appreciate you guys. I gotta say, both wonderful personal relationships for me that I've so enjoyed getting to know both of you better, and both so thoughtful on the space. And I'm always especially interested when we have different ideas about stuff. And I love exploring on these, you know, in these formats in a way like a bunch of people who respect each other, who have ideas a lot the same and some different. And so that's what we try to do. Anything we didn't cover today that you'd love, you kind of, before we wrap up, to share anything about anything, how you feeling about the world, the market, your art, any cool artists, anything you think is being overlooked.
MP Cause, if you see him on Twitter, block him.
Oh, really? Don't tell Uncle Pennybags that.
Yeah, sell all your MP Cause bags. No, I'm just kidding. No, I love him. He's one of my favorite artists.
Yeah. He's been actually in the clique. We talk about him a lot.
Oh, really? Yeah, he's so good. We like to give each other shit. So
I like that. By the way, I always say, like, if I meet someone, like, oh yeah, hi, hello, all polite. I'm like, that means I don't like him. I'm like, yo, you fucking piece of shit. It means we're best friends. Yeah, sure. That's interesting. So you like MP Cause? Wow, I love to hear that. How about you, Patrick?
Yeah.
I'm gonna be sharing details about a show at the beginning of October with a lot of moving pieces soon. That'll be an open call. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about highlighting some new artists. So that's been in the works for a minute here, and I'm excited to share the details soon. So
and the new doppelganger for dummies coming soon.
Yeah. Finally adapt, make it easy. And I'm putting a new thing on this morning. So.
Oh, you're a badass, man. Great. Okay, well, dude, I love you guys. Really appreciate the time. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and everyone who listens, much respect and appreciate you. All right,
cool.
Talk soon.
ACK, good to see you. OG, thank you.
Great talking.
Love you guys.
Later.
Later, guys.